Okay, we're to the stage of inking our comic now. You remember I showed you my initial breakdown for a comic just on a piece of lined paper. I think I did it during 20 minutes in drawing class while my students were drawing. And, an idea will come to me and I'll put it down on paper fairly quickly and just put down dump that which is in my mind about the idea. So I encourage people to do that. Even if you don't have time to do the crisp, nice version of it, you'll have those notes that you can return to. So I penciled a version of it on a piece of cardstock here. You'll notice my penciling is fairly loose, and I still can shift things around. I may shift things around as the process goes on, but it's getting closer to completion. In professional comic publishers, at least back in the day, they broke down all the different stages. The person who penciled would not necessarily be the person who inked, and somebody else would add colors, and somebody else would add the lettering. But we're fine artists, and we're doing comics as our art form, a creator generated form. So we're taking on all the steps. Now, I had my script, typed it out, breaking things down to each panel. And then I thought, do I want to hand letter all of it, or do I want to print it out and then assemble it? One can assemble it in Photoshop, scan in the artwork, and then start doing layers of text, or some of those other apps that are on the list that I gave, that I posted on Canvas at the beginning of the semester. Investigate those if you haven't, for putting together, doing graphics work on your phone, for instance. So I printed out the text in Lafayette Comics font, which was one that I downloaded that I use a lot. As it is, the font, the size may be a little too large, so I may print it out again. But I've got that, and I can cut it out and lay it on and paste it on as necessary. In a disorganized artistic way, I'm doing all these different steps, which takes longer than the professional way, undoubtedly, but I don't have a deadline of next month's issue. But you guys have deadlines this week of producing your comic and getting it done early enough in the week that I can assemble it into our class comic. So regarding the lettering, when I do lettering, this is done with one of those micro point pens. I always go back, I like my hand, but I go back and thicken parts of the letters and make it more legible. And finally, when I scan it in Photoshop, I'll clean up places that have spurs and so on that I don't want. Here, I went to a Sharpie, could use that for emphasis elsewhere. Now, don't be afraid to do some fun cartoon lettering as well, especially for something like your title. You don't want an exciting comic and then the title be weak. Go back and look at Will Eisner's The Spirit and all the creative things he did with the name The Spirit, becoming a building that the spirit was coming out of or something, or a burglar was shinnying down the side of. So I just did some comic samples right here, comic drawing samples. I was fairly young when I learned the drop shadow and thought, oh, this is so cool. and overused it, gets overused. You could have lettering be architectural, like something like structures in the desert. I remember the movie Exodus had big letters spelling it. It's historic important. So Google that poster for that movie 50 some years ago. A letter can be melting, the C from ice, the F from fire, a C that's chrome. You notice the reflection is towards the middle of the letter. An R for robot with rivets in it. A furry F. S for snake. If you have a character called the snake, it could be a snake itself. And how about that U? Is that ugly enough? With veins and a little eye and hairy pimples and so on. So let your titles reflect your content. Have fun with the title. That's the first thing your reader will see. So sock it to them. All right, I'm going to ink this thing, or at least some of it, and be back. I'm back, and I've been inking. So this comic I got the idea of for about a year and a half ago is about President Obama visiting the mayor of Detroit, Aretha Franklin, finding out why Detroit is so prosperous. And she wears low-cut gowns. You can YouTube see her performing. She's fun to draw. So is Obama. So are residents collecting signatures on petitions. It's my crazy political comic, and I don't want to be accused of pushing politics down your throat. So if you want to see the finished results, email me after the semester ends. But what I wanted to show you about comic inking is I used a microball and a Sharpie. I could have been more ambitious, could have used a brush and ink. Remember all those Milton Caniff and Jack Kirby comics we looked at that had such nice brushwork? Or China marker. Of course, you'd expect me to plug China marker. You can get some very good textures using it in your comic. So consider that. Maybe not for the precision parts, but for backgrounds and so on. Remember, you can mix media. I want you to use black media this semester, this week, to stay simple, but you can try different things. After I inked this, the parts of it are still unfinished. I erased, carefully erased. Here's a good little eraser I've had for years, a little German-made plastic eraser. Here's a funky old kneaded eraser, which you probably have from your drawing classes. Be sure and go over and get rid of those pencil lines after you've inked, so your comic will look crisp and nice. You notice the format is kind of vertical. That's because I like to do comics that are photocopied and use a full sheet of paper. I did one and gave copies to my relatives a couple years ago. Family comics. Notice I have it almost like horror lettering, like Tales from the Crypt. When I was in grad school, I did a comic one semester. Because I was in an innovative program, conceptual design, they let us do what we wanted, as long as we convinced them we were doing it with some dedication. So instead of Vault of Horror, I did Fault of Mosher. We had been talking about sex and identity in artwork in the class, so I say it's loaded with plenty of that. So now you're getting some sense of why I showed you these characters like Crumb and Phoebe Gleckner, who do autobiographical stuff. I think comics work very well. Serious content presented in a kind of bitterly comic, humorous way. So, stuff that hurts, I try to deal with it by drawing a comic about it. Things about politics, I try to draw a comic about it. So that may not be the direction you want to go. I'm just telling you that it's how I often use the medium, and want you to know it can be used that way. But if you just want it for something very light and entertaining, that's beautiful too. So this is the week you ink, and I very much look forward to the results. I'll be doing a cover. I think we were going to call it Drawing a Blank. Only a few people were in the discussion about the name of our class comic, and I still need some biographies from some people for the inside front cover. Go to that discussion on Canvas. But we're on the home stretch, people. One more week, and I think we're going to come up with something very nice indeed.